Hello and welcome to Economic Forum, a program where we discuss various issues affecting our economy in Zimbabwe. These can be issues to do with investment, to do with mining, to do with any aspects of commerce and industry, education and even religion. We look at these issues to see how they affect our economy and business here in Zimbabwe. My name is John Masu. Today we are going to have a very interesting topic which is on intellectual property. At times we use other people's products, yet we can read about what is said about that product, who owns it and so forth, but we ignore that and we use that only to realize when we are being taken to court and something like that. And it is something that we're going to be discussing today with our expert, who is Winnet Mupaso. Winnet Mupaso, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mr. Masuku.
Maybe to begin with, people may want to understand. I just gave a general overview of the definition, but what exactly is intellectual property?
In simpler terms, intellectual property refers to mental creations, the creative processes that emanate from the human minds, and that brings about products and works and services that are useful in commerce. In other words, when we're talking of intellectual property, we're talking about intangible assets that are properties which also have an economical value, just like any other assets. We do have different forms of IP assets, and I am going to highlight a few of these intellectual property assets that are commonly registered and protected in Zimbabwe. We do have patents, which gives protection to inventions. These are new inventions or new improvements of already existing inventions that gives a technical solution to a problem in the society. We also have another type of intellectual property, which are industrial designs, which gives protection to designs. By designs, I refer to the ornamentation or the aesthetic features of a product, that which gives the outside appearance of a product. We also have another type of intellectual property, which is trademarks. This refers to distinctive signs, names, logos, and symbols, or a combination thereof, which identifies a product and distinguishes a product from one entity to the other entity. We also have another type of intellectual property, which is copyright and related rights. This gives protection to creative works such as literary and artistic works. By this, we are referring to the literary works such as books, poems, and also refer to musical works, broadcasting works. We also refer to sculptures, drawings, designs. All these fall under copyright and related rights.
At times people don't know that it was created by so-and-so and they start using it. But let's start from some of the information that we see written on the packaging of these products that we often ignore and don't even read in order for us to understand how we can use that product. So you want to say something about the importance of actually reading some of those issues about logos and trademarks that we see on the packaging.
So the importance of reading on the logos or on the information that we see on the products is for us to be able to see if we are buying genuine products. We need to be see the identity of the product. Where is this product coming from? If it's a book, we need to see who is the author of the book. If it's music, we need to see rightfully on maybe it's a CD, who is the author of the music, so that we make sure we are buying genuine products and we are not buying counterfeit products, or we are not buying fake products.
Yes. At times, it is written that you need to get permission from the owner of that copyright, and you see that it's a foreign product and so forth, and people just go on to use it without taking any steps. What is the danger in doing that?
or the dangers of using copyrighted works, or the dangers of using works that are protected against infringement, is that you, as the user or the one that have copied the work, you are putting yourself at risk of intellectual property rights litigation actions, where the right holder of that intellectual property that you're using is able to sue you for you using that their assets without their authorization. So it is very important that whenever you are using, let me give you an example of music. You see, these days we have got so much content that is being created on TikTok, on Instagram. It is very important that before you use anyone's music, you need to highlight that you do not have the rights to that music, so that it shows that it's not your music. You are not taking that music as yours. You are not putting a picture to the public that they will think that you also own that music, but they should know that the performances, the actions that you're doing is what you own, but the music doesn't belong to you.
Do we actually see that happening, where people are putting these images on the internet, on TikTok or Facebook and other platforms? Do they actually make that acknowledgement in most cases?
In most cases, people are not doing that, but I think it's because they don't know. Intellectual property is a subject that has not been put to the public for a long time. It's something which is still new to most of the public, especially in Africa and in Zimbabwe as a country. So as an office, this is what we are trying to do, trying to educate the public, trying to educate our citizens to know the importance of copyright, so that they will not end up in IP litigations.
That's Winnet Mupaso, who is an intellectual property expert. She's explaining about intellectual property, how we can use other people's creations and credit accordingly, so that don't end up with litigation and any other problems. That's Economic Forum for you today. Join us in the second segment of the program. Today we are discussing intellectual property with Winnet Mupaso, who is from the Zimbabwe Intellectual Property Office, or ZIPO. You've just given us an overview of intellectual property in Zimbabwe with some definitions, so that people understand what we mean by property, intellectual property. You mentioned copyright, you mentioned trademarks, and so forth. How do you ensure that your intellectual property is properly registered and protected?
So for one, to make sure that the intellectual property is effectively protected, they need to make sure that it is registered. So the registration of intellectual property lies in the purviews of the Intellectual Property Office, which is called the Zimbabwe Intellectual Property Office, a section within the Department of Deeds, Companies and Intellectual Property, which is within the Ministry of Justice, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs. The Zimbabwe government has got a robust legal framework for the protection of intellectual property. We do have Patents Act Chapter 2603 for the protection of inventions. We do have Trademarks Act Chapter 2604 for the protection of trademarks. We do have Industrial Designs Act Chapter 2602 for the protection of industrial designs. And we also have Copyright Act and Related Rights Chapter 2605. Which protects the copyright. So these laws are the ones that outlines how intellectual property is registered, and what are the exceptions and limitations that we do have in using the intellectual property. For example, in the Copyright Act, we do have exceptions and limitations for the use of copyrighted works, where, for example, we do have some provisions which allows the use of written works for educational purposes without the authorization of the owner of the works. So this is what we call fair use, and it is provided for in the Copyright and Related Rights Act. So for the protection, after submitting your application at the Zimbabwe Intellectual Property Office, the right holder is granted with a certificate which gives them an authority to exclude others from using their intellectual property without their authority. For protection of intellectual property doesn't lie only in Zimbabwe, because for businesses, for economic growth, we need to make sure that our local businesses are also exporting their products. So it is also very much important that the local businesses make sure that they submit their applications, protect their intellectual property beyond borders.
While there, you have explained how you, as the owner, can protect yourself, and we explained in briefly that it's important that before you use someone's product, intellectual product, you have to get permission. Now, after this registration, where does the power come from to actually stop someone if they post something on TikTok or on YouTube and so forth?
So with the registration of intellectual property, you are given the rights. Now we are referring to now as intellectual property rights holder. You now have the rights to exclude others from using your intellectual property, and you have the right to sue anyone that you see misappropriating your intellectual property. So with the registration, with the certificate with you, you have all the rights that you want for the use of your intellectual property assets. And we are now calling you an intellectual property rights holder, not an intellectual property assets holder. Yes, you do have the assets, but you also have the legal rights to protect your intellectual property assets.
And with those rights, actually, you can monetize your products, you can go into business and so forth. Things that many people may not be aware of, because at times you can see them posting things that they know the fact that they can actually monetize them and so forth. So how can IP then, make us grow in business?
So IP is one of the cornerstones of economic growth. And for one to be able to monetize their intellectual property, there are a lot of avenues to commercialize your intellectual property. So what starts with is having a creative mind, coming up with a product after your creativeness, and then the next thing is you need to make sure that your asset is protected, and after protecting your asset, you need to make sure that your asset is in the market. How then can you put this asset in the market? There are a lot of ways of doing that. There is what we call licensing agreements, where one decides not to use or to make their intellectual property, but to license someone to use their intellectual property. We also have what we call franchising agreements, where one also makes a franchising agreement with another party so that the other party uses their intellectual property assets.
So this can be withdrawn after some time when there is disagreement and so forth?
Yes, they can be withdrawn just like any other agreements where you write, you agree for a period. So you can have those rights for a certain period of time, where you make an agreement, you agree for a certain period of time that you'll be using so-and-so's intellectual property for your business. And this licenses doesn't only happen in Zimbabwe. Intellectual property, the good thing about intellectual property is it helps you as the owner of your intellectual property to make alliances, business alliances with investors outside the country. So you can actually make a licensing agreement with a multinational company from outside Zimbabwe.
You talked about franchising, and it's something that is very common, where you find that the owner, the one who is the original business, has actually given out that business to be managed by other people under those MOUs or agreements that you are talking about. How are we doing as Zimbabwe in that area? Is it something that we can capitalize on more than other forms of business, especially when we go international?
Yes, I would advise that franchising is one of the business agreements that we as Zimbabweans can use to leverage on our businesses. Because with franchising, you will see that the groundwork would have been done by the
For
owner
you.
of, yes, the groundwork is done, the intellectual property assets are already there, the trademarks are already there, the inventions, the processes are already there. So it is easier for you as a starting business to start with the franchising agreement for you to be able to grow whilst they are learning through those agreements.
So we need Mupaso, who is an intellectual property expert, explaining to us what intellectual property is all about and how we can actually utilize it in business. So join us in the third and final segment of Economic Forum. We're now in the third and final segment of Economic Forum, where today we are discussing intellectual property with our guest here, Winnet Mupaso, who is an intellectual property expert from the Zimbabwe Intellectual Property Office. Now, Winnet, how do you address these issues to do with counterfeit notes or information, as well as piracy? Because it is becoming rampant, and I'm sure your office is addressing that.
I truly agree with you. Counterfeit and piracy has become rampant in Zimbabwe, in Africa, and in the world over. So as the office, we are trying as much as we can to come up with initiatives that will help in countering counterfeits in the nation. So the first thing that we are trying to do is to make sure that the public is educated, because that one thing that we have noticed is some people are doing these counterfeits, buying these counterfeits because of ignorance. They don't know that what they are doing is against the laws. So the first thing that we need to do is to make sure that everyone knows the importance of intellectual property and everyone knows how bad counterfeiting is. We have noticed that we have so many counterfeit medicines, counterfeit medications that are being sold in the streets, which is very, very dangerous, which poses a very bad risk to the public health. So we are actually in the process of educating the consumers and the public at large to make sure that they don't buy counterfeits and to let them know how important it is to stick to genuine products.
Yes, but as the office, how are you dealing with the trade offices in Zimbabwe to ensure that they don't license people who bring these things? We know that some of these things are smuggled, but just to protect, the consumer, how do those, who actually, give licenses also look into that? And of course, the law enforcement agents, the police, how do you deal with them so that they are aware of these things?
Yes, we are also cooperating with other government agencies, like you said, the Zimbabwe Republic Police. We also make sure that they are also educated and they are also collaborating with industry, with intellectual property right holders, and they are also going across the country, making raids, making sure that they stop the selling of counterfeit products. And we're also working with the border measures with the government is in the process of making sure that the border measures are put so that there is a close product surveillance at the points of entry, so that we make sure that we avoid coming in of counterfeit products from outside the country.
Piracy has been on the cards for many years. Are you winning in that area so that musicians and others actually benefit from their intellectual property? Is there any progress in stopping it completely?
This is going to be a thing of the past, but not very soon. But we, as an office, we are trying to make sure that The first thing that we are doing is we have also to educate the content creators, because that's where we are also even getting problems. We have some issues with the musicians taking other people's music and maybe reformatting to make or to reproducing them to make it to become like it is theirs. So we are actually in the process of making sure that we educate everyone so that they understand the importance of not pirating other people's products.
We need IP and trade, intellectual property and trade, very, very important, since we are trading. We're becoming a global village and we're trading with different countries. We've just explained how we can protect ourselves from counterfeit and piracy. But how are we doing actually in IP and trade?
As you rightfully know, that Zimbabwe is participating in the African Continental Free Trade Area, where we are also party to that agreement. And this automatically makes Zimbabwe open to the global market and increases the marketing opportunities for our businesses. We also advise all businesses in the local businesses to make sure that they are protected by also registering their intellectual property assets to be protected in the regional through the African Regional Intellectual Property Organization, or even going beyond Africa, because now with the borderless markets, because of e-commerce, you find some products being sold in India, in China, so you also need to be protected. And we advise our business people to make sure that they are protected internationally through the World Intellectual Property Organization, so that they make sure that their products are protected, and also it protects them from infringing other people's rights. When they know about intellectual property, when they enter into a foreign market, they will be able to understand the importance of not using other people's intellectual property assets. Also, intellectual property helps to attract foreign direct investment. No investor wants to themselves to get involved in litigation disputes. So if you are protected, if you have got your intellectual property assets protected rightfully, you'll be able to attract foreign investors.
Well, Winnet would like to thank you very much for coming onto Economic Forum. That's Winnet Mupaso, who is an intellectual property expert coming from the Zimbabwe Intellectual Property Office. And you have been explaining what intellectual property is all about and how we can actually protect our intellectual property. So viewers, if you'd like to get in touch with us about some of the issues that Winnet raised here, you can do so on the numbers that are showing on your screen. If you'd like to engage with us and the office that Winnet works in order for you to protect yourself and understand what you're doing, you can do so on the social media platforms that again are showing on the screen. If you have missed some of the episodes of Economic Forum, you can actually watch them on our YouTube channel, which is Economic Forum Zimbabwe. So on behalf of Winnet Mupaso and the production crew, this is John Masugu wishing you happy viewing.